Redditors who explore abandoned places. What was the strangest slash scariest slash creepiest thing you have found? I am not a regular explorer, but I grew up in a small rural New England town, and as a kid would always venture into the woods and find neat old things. My dad noticed that I was really interested in exploring and finding old things near our land, so one day asked if I wanted to go see something that no one else he knew had known about. I jumped at the chance, and we drove off into the mountains and parked on the side of the road. We got out and walked into the woods for what felt like 45 minutes, and we came across this really small cemetery. There had to be 10 or so stones, and you couldn't really make out anything on them, but a couple of them that read something like 1802 to 1803 and 1803 to 1805. My dad said he stumbled on it as a kid, and it must have been a small family cemetery. It just kind of broke my heart thinking about how many of those stones were probably infant slash toddler. I grew up in rural New York and had a very similar experience. Out behind my house was a cornfield and a large wooded area, and deep behind the woods was a cemetery that had been disused for some time. Some of the headstones were for soldiers who had served in the Revolutionary and Civil Wars, and the most recent was probably from the 1920s. The cool slash creepy thing about cemeteries that old are the somewhat sinister messages on the tombstones. Adding a memento mori, or a reminder to the living that they would die as well, was a very popular thing to do in the 18th and 19th centuries. Some of the stones had a skull and crossbones carved into them, which was supposed to be a Puritan reminder to live a good life. But stumbling across it at 9 p.m. made me use some choice language they certainly would not have called good. Friend of mine and I explored this old abandoned house deep in the woods near his house. Going through it, we found baby grand pianos of varying sizes throughout the house. But that wasn't the weird thing. We also found letters, dated back to World War I, from a wife to her husband stationed overseas. At first, they were letters of how things were in the States, how the kids were, how life without him, and how much she loved and missed him. The more we read, though, the more the letters turned into something we weren't expecting. She had fallen out of love with him and found another man. She left him for another man while serving his country overseas. It was sad reading those last few letters. So I grew up in a relatively rural part of upstate New York. Out in the middle of nowhere, there was this abandoned cement factory that had been left to fallow for decades. It was a huge facility out in the middle of the woods, had its own living space, officers, generator building, and rock crusher. Both were massive pieces of equipment in a hangar-sized room and underground tunnels. On top of that were the silos, maybe 10 or 15 stories tall, with corrugated metal stairs that take you all the way to the top. Anyways, we would explore these tunnels from time to time, and one day we found a room at the bottom of one of the silos. It was completely dark, maybe about the size of a small bedroom and square, with what could only be described as a 3-foot wide, floor-level moat, filled with brackish water that went down maybe 5 or 10 feet. The water was almost perfectly at floor level, so if you didn't use a flashlight or watch where you were going, it would have been incredibly easy to fall into it. In the center of the room was a box, maybe 7 feet long by 3 feet wide, and maybe 4 feet tall. The goddamn thing looked like a casket. This room was the creepiest place I've ever been in. Perfectly silent, weird moat, no light. Don't get me wrong, as a teenager I thought it was the coolest place ever. But if I were writing a horror novel about an entombed vampire escaping his prison, this is where I would start it. Sadly, the facility is no longer easily accessible these days. There's private security, and I think it's being used as a repair site for Amtrak trains that pass through. It's kind of a pity. I loved exploring this place. I have very fond memories of climbing to the top of the silos and just watching the stars. I feel like every kid needs a place. For me, it's always the evidence that a place isn't abandoned that I find scariest. I love poking around in places I shouldn't be just for the joy of seeing a rare sight, but the moment I see a tent, bedroll, or telltale toilet tissue tower, I turn right the hell around. I don't want to surprise a squatter. I'm confident in saying that I get more conversational with your standard panhandlers, gutter punks, and vagrants than most, and I find that even the ones who are laid back tend to get their hackles up if someone surprises them at a camp they thought was hidden. That and track traffic. If a railway runs through your city or town, specifically an old freight line, Chances are that half of it is more or less out of use, and has a variety of ramshackle locations that could be very fun to poke at. That said, I've been on disused tracks and had specially outfitted pickups and motorized handcars sneak up on me pretty fucking close before I realized they were coming up on me. And tell you what, I dive into the bushes every time. I don't know how much they'd care if they saw me, and I don't wish to find out. My cousin's grandmother's old house. She lived 100 meters from where we live, and when I was 1 to 2 years old she died. I went to explore her house, since we are the closest building to her house. When I tried the door it was locked, so I went up on a broken window and climbed in. I didn't expect much, since it was a pretty tiny house. It did have an attic but no basement, or I just couldn't find it. So I started looking some places up, her bedroom, living room, and such. I found some kind of closet, or something like that. It was pretty big for a closet, but I opened the door, and I got scared as fuck. There was some kind of mannequin. It had a dress on. Black, like something you would wear in a funeral. I just decided to leave after that. I was walking with a friend, and we were trying to find a quicker route back to where we were staying. We were walking on a road next to the ocean, which was quite a bit below us. We thought it would be more scenic to walk on the beach, so we climbed down only to discover it wasn't going to be easy walking. Where we expected sand, there was boulders, and we had to climb and jump in order to keep going forward. And it was pretty abandoned. Clearly, this wasn't a public area, and the road we were walking on was out of sight. After a while, I saw a cave that sort of looked like it had a green net covering the entrance. My friend was, rightfully, freaked out, but I was insistent on looking inside. I climbed over to it and pulled the curtain away, only to see massive piles of abalone shells. There were thousands of them. We had found a poacher's hiding place for their shells. Where I'm from, poachers are normally armed, and pouching abalone shells is quite illegal, so it's scary to think that we could have been attacked and nobody would have been able to even hear us. At the time, my friend and I were 13. I was looking in some old motel, little rooms, on a rural South Carolina highway. I was working as a photographer for TV news. We were doing stand-ups, and the reporter was trying to think of what to say. I went exploring. I was going toward the center building on the back row of the motel when my reporter said he was ready. So, I shot the stand-up and we left. 2 days later we got a call from the sheriff's office asking about what we were doing there. We told him. It turns out there was a dead man hanging from some vines tied to the ceiling of the room. He had been beaten and hanged. I was a few feet from finding this dead person. The motel is nearly rotted into the ground today. I think the word pine was in the name of the motel. I once entered the abandoned submarine base of the Soviet Navy in Balaclava in 2002, before it became a museum. I was led by a group of street urchins who knew the base like the back of their hands. Maybe they were the sons of officers who once lived there. I don't speak a word of Ukrainian nor Russian. They led me through tunnels whose humidity created a fog that enabled my flashlight to illuminate only 10 to 15 meters. The manholes and anything remotely useful were removed by scrap iron looters, to the point I spent more time watching my steps rather than where I was going. I found outlines in the paint on the walls of staircases leading to an upper floor. I saw the flooded tunnels that offered refuge to the submarines of the Red Navy, surrounded by old rusted gantries, suspended platforms, and bridges too big to be carried away by looters. I found an email scrawled on the wall. I took a photograph, emailed it to the address, but I never got a reply. The coolest thing was the schematic diagram of a torpedo painted on the wall. At some point I may have been convicted as a spy for that. There was this old condemned hospital in Maryland that I visited in high school, as a dare because all the cool kids did it. Found a room that was literally filled with prosthetic limbs. That was some weird shit. Another time I had a girlfriend who loved exploring abandoned places. So we went to this old school/dorms place, and apparently the gym had been turned into a breeding/nesting place for vultures. The scene was just creepy, and I'll never forget the smell. I've done a lot of urban exploration in abandoned houses, psychiatric institutions, hospitals, etc. I think one of the strangest things I've ever found was inside of a housing building at an abandoned psychiatric facility. This facility was unique as it had about 100 buildings on the property. and this particular building I was in was used as living space for people who were being prepared for transitioning back into everyday life. It was basically like a small hospital with 15 bedrooms and some staff rooms. I was with a friend, and we were exploring the bedrooms with our flashlights, and I walked through the doorway into one of the bedrooms, and there's a full-size male white-tailed deer with antlers, probably 4 feet across, standing about 5 feet in front of me in the middle of the bedroom. He froze, I froze, and then my friend came up behind me, saw the deer, screamed, and ran. As soon as my friend screamed, the deer jumped and turned around and ran into the wall. I didn't stick around long enough to see where he went next, LOL. Found an old school bus sitting out in the middle of the woods. It had been converted for living, complete with a small kitchen and a wood stove. On the table was a deck of cards, an overflowing ashtray, and a cup that had coffee in it that had long since dried out. Clean dishes in the dish rack covered with dust and mouse droppings. Cupboard doors open in the kitchen showed cans of Campbell's soup, condensed milk, and boxes of crackers that had been ransacked by mice. The bed was trashed by animals, pillows ripped apart, and the stuffing spread all over. Underneath the shredded blanket, the leg of a teddy bear peeked out. Old books on the bedside table had swelled up from getting wet and were covered in mold. Ragged curtains with a cheerful flower print hung around the windows. Outside, a rusted swing set stood between the trees, the one swing covered in moss. An old pickup truck was parked nearby, although there was no sign of a road anywhere. Split firewood was stacked against the side of the bus. The creepiest thing about it? The bullet holes that covered the rear window. There's a hunting road right next to my house. I live in Georgia on a big hill. Everything used to be peach orchards, so the ground is stair-stepped in certain places. One thing I've noticed, rock piles. Random rock piles everywhere. Big and long enough for a body, for sure. Not just dirt mounds from fallen trees, piles of rocks. I would suspect Native American origin, but pretty much all of Georgia has been logged at some point. All the trees are pretty young. But I dunno. I did find a dark-ass abandoned shack. A big bird lives around it. Not a vulture, it's shaped different. I didn't see it at first, but when I approached the building it flew off and scared the shit out of me. The shack didn't have much except an old shower chair. The type they make, so that disabled people can sit down in the shower. It was dark though and pretty creepy looking through it. People who have been in a coma, please share your impressions. I was in a coma for about 2 weeks, following a cardiac arrest as a teen. I was technically dead for over an hour, in fact. People often ask me if I could hear my family talking to me, or if I was dreaming. The answer is no. There is a huge hole in my memory, beginning about 2 weeks before the coma, through a week after waking up. And waking up is in quotes because I would wake up, ask a bunch of semi-incoherent questions, fall back under, then wake up again and ask the exact same questions, in the exact same order. Repeat 6 or 7 times. The coma was not even blackness. It just does not exist. I remember having the hardest time believing it was actually mid-October, when the last day I remembered was late September. I was in a medically induced coma, following a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I don't remember much, but my family described moments of me appearing to be awake. Most notable, an apparent attempt at humor. Apparently, they put these mitts on my hands to prevent me from ripping my ventilation tubes out over and over, but I pretended they were my lobster claws. I have no recollection, but it's a real me move. Edit. Gold was really too generous. Thank you so much. It's also my first gold. So big hugs to you, stranger. Edit 2. I've never known so much kindness. Truly. My heart is very full right now that my girlfriend of 6 years, and sort of fiancé, was in a severe car crash when she was 16. Both of her best friends died instantly. She was the only survivor, but they didn't think she would make it. She was in a coma for 9 months. She was in what is called a waking coma. She retained normal periods of sleep and open-eyed wakefulness, but no higher brain functions. Here's some things about her experience. She doesn't have any memories of the year prior or the year and a half-ish after her coma, and obviously no memories of the car crash. She suffered a TBI, and when she first got out of the coma, she would get naked and sexual with people and anger very easily. These are common problems of people who suffer a TBI. She went back to school after the coma, but her brain was still healing a lot. She was held back another year because her brain was still not retaining anything. Today she is a wonderful, bright 30-year-old with a college degree. She has a slight speech impediment, gets frustrated easier than most, and it took her a while to get driving down. Honestly, she still scares the hell out of me when she drives, but there are worse drivers out there. After being in a really bad accident that left one of my good friends, the driver, brain dead, they put me into a chemically induced coma for under a week to prevent brain damage due to swelling. When I first woke up, my memory was much better than it was as it gradually faded in the days to come. I have a journal my mother recorded things in, and I recalled many things I shouldn't have been able to immediately after waking up. Today, I have very little memory of it all, but I can definitely say that having positive people around you definitely helps when you're in a situation like that. If you have a friend in this situation, don't disregard them. Even though your life has moved on, they may wake up one day, and in their mind, not a day has passed since the last conversation they had with you. I'm not sure where I read it, but a girl talked about her experience, and she mentioned that it was like going in and out of sleeping/dreaming. Just when she would feel like she was waking up, she could hear parts of conversations or the TV, but she would slip right back to sleeping. She also said when people would clean her, she could feel them touch sensitive parts of her like her armpit and butthole area. I'm an inpatient phlebotomist, and even though some of my patients are sedated, I still always introduce myself and say I'm here to draw some blood, just in case they could hear me. Yep, nurse here, and even if people are unconscious, I always still talk to them. Even when laying out a dead person, I still talk to them. They're not there, but it's all about respect. Same here. In nursing school for both my externship and practicum, I was on med-surg units. Anytime I had an unconscious/unresponsive patient, I talked to them just like I would any other patient. Hi, Mrs. So-and-so. I'm Scarlett, and I'm a student nurse who will be taking care of you tonight. And I just do my usual chit-chat. I mentioned my nursing school experience, only because as a practicing nurse I worked in labor and delivery, and now work in a medical office, so I don't have unconscious/unresponsive patients like I did on med-surg. I had one patient for 3 nights in a row who was generally unresponsive but stable, no talking, very little moving, no real reaction to people, but breathing on her own, stable vitals, and I carried on one-sided conversations with her, telling her what I was doing, letting her know I'd be moving her arm for the blood pressure cuff, that I'd be checking her pulses, talking to her about what was on her TV, etc. We had to do oral care with those little mouth sponges each shift. The first night, she resisted by clamping her lips shut. I talked to her and told what I was doing, that I was trying to just clean her teeth. By the third night, she didn't resist at all. That was the only reaction I got from her all 3 nights, and I'd like to think it was because I talked to her like a person rather than just walking in the room and doing my nightly tasks. Was put in an induced coma when I was 9 years old after a pretty bad car accident, which left me with a fractured skull. All I remember is a bad dream about having a bad headache and hearing my older sister telling everyone, including my parents, to get the fuck out of her way because she wanted to see me. I found out later that this was on the night it happened, and they were trying to calm her down before she saw me. Edit. For those who are telling me to let her know how awesome she is, I made sure to. Not quite, but almost. Hug the life out of her. Ooh, I can answer this one. I was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks, about 3 months ago. I had open heart surgery. It didn't go well. Had trouble coming off the ventilator, so they just put me in a coma to try to give me time to heal. I had nightmares the entire time from the medicine they were using to knock me out. I thought I had been kidnapped by a nurse and was a victim of sex trafficking. I thought my drug addict aunt had her friends rob my sister and her husband, killing my brother-in-law and one of their children, and I thought I was constantly being grabbed by people under my bed. It was not fun. I can't say that I knew I was in a coma or anything. I am usually one of those people that when I have a bad dream, I can tell myself it is just a dream and wake myself up in order to end it. This was not like that. I was convinced it was all really happening. Wow. This is similar to the response I have to opiates. Also, I learned via genetic testing that I'm resistant to the pain-killing effects, but tend to have worse side effects, which I'm assuming are to blame for this. The first time I took Vicodin was after I got my wisdom teeth out, and I got trapped in an escalating series of nightmares that I couldn't escape. Like you. Normally, if I don't like a dream/nightmare, I can usually just change it or leave and start a different dream. So at first I was sad about the dream I was experiencing. My little cousins were in a half-submerged Ferris wheel out in the ocean that had sealed enclosures that would dip under the water for a neat view of the fish. But I knew their enclosure wasn't sealed properly, and they were going to drown, and I was trying to swim out to them. I was struggling against the water and knew I wouldn't make it to them in time, but not overly stressed. So I left that dream and woke up in a worse one, over and over and over and over, until I was screaming and crying in my dream, hoping that I was making a noise in real life, and my boyfriend would hear me and wake me up. Then I woke up in his room, with him asleep next to me in bed. I was so relieved, but still super shaken up. I got out of bed to go outside and breathe. But when I opened the door of his bedroom, instead of a hallway, I was on a second-story walkway of a motel-style place, as if his room was a motel room. All my relief froze and shattered as I realized I wasn't safe, and I was still trapped in the dream. I started walking down the walkway onto this road that connected to it, and was nearing a telephone pole when I heard the most terrifying angry scream, and my boyfriend at the time came running out of his room with a large barbecue fork in his hand. I froze and backed up against the telephone pole, and as I screamed he came up and stabbed me through my open mouth, down through my tongue, down through the soft bottom of my mouth/jaw, through my neck, all the way to the telephone pole, briefly pinning me there. He did that over and over while I screamed and felt like I was dying until I finally woke up. In retrospect, I think that the finale was my brain processing the pain from the wisdom tooth removal as the Vicodin was wearing off at that point. Still unsure why it takes away my inherent lucid dreaming, though. This is really bizarre, but my uncle, a very serious, strict and rather dry man, had an accident and went into coma a few years back. He never believed anything he couldn't touch. No talks about souls or anything similar. He was in coma for a few weeks until he woke up and had this crazy AF story. He said he saw himself in a bubble, floating around in a white place, and it was peaceful and beautiful. But then he said about other bubbles he could see around him. All of them had other people in them. He distinctly remembered a black-haired woman singing in the bubble closest to his, until one day her bubble bursted, and she disappeared. When he woke up, he could give a very clear description of her body, age, all that. Now the crazy bit. There was a woman, one floor below him, in a coma that sadly had passed away before he woke up. You guessed it, black hair, age, body all correct. He had never met or seen this woman in his life. His whole idea of life changed after this. It still makes me think sometimes. Where was he? He thinks all the people in bubbles around him were patients in the same hospital. Could it be? We'll probably never know. I was placed in a medical coma for a week when I was younger, and I can relate to this. The only moments I can remember is this. I was falling through a series of hospital rooms with my mom asking me to wake up, which I suppose was the case. But the moment that stood out to me after the fact was I had this moment where I thought these lobstermen, for lack of a better term made of pure darkness, were attacking me and were planning to do all they could to keep me under, and I panicked and fought back. That's all I remember from that, but after I came to, my stepfather told me at one point during the coma I was awake and was fighting the staff and pulling out IVs and feeding tubes to try to escape. The only reason I knew this is because when I became lucid again, I was handcuffed to my bed and asked what happened. I killed a man and don't know if it was the right thing to do. This was multiple years ago, back in the young hooligan days, at some party in the absolute middle of nowhere outside of some small town with absolutely nothing. There weren't too many people there, and I honestly still don't know how my group ended up there, but we did. We weren't even from anywhere around here. The night just took us there. Everything was going great, having a great time being normal 17 to 20-year-old kids, doing what kids that age did. Had the music loud, beers flowing, just being kids. I 20M, with two of my friends, 20M and 18M, kind of sticking to ourselves most of the night due to the fact that we really didn't know how we got there or anybody else that was there. We're throwing them back like we never have. As the night rolls on, we each find our own little fling to keep us occupied, making small talk and such. We all know how it goes. The night kept going, and we were all in and out of conversation with each other and our little flings. But deep into conversation with one of my buddies, I realized that the girl I was flirting with had disappeared, which was weird due to the fact that she rode with the girl one of my friends was messing with. So I walk up to her and my friend and ask her what happened to her friend, if she had went home early or what, to which she responds, I am her only way out of here, so she's got to be here somewhere. So that rouses suspicion. Nobody's seen her in about 30 minutes, so we all begin to look. In a decent-sized house, with what had to have been 3 to 4 bedrooms. I come across a closed door with a light shining from under, and I knock and get no response. So I try the door handle, and it's locked. So I ask the guy whose house we were in about the door, to which he responds there shouldn't be anybody in that room. So I immediately think the worst and stumble with the door handle trying to get it unlocked with no reward. Then kick the door of the hinges, and what I saw still chills me to the bone. I won't go into too much detail for the young minds out there, but it was a disgusting sight. 1. The bed. The girl I was flirting with, no clothes on, hands and feet tied to the bed, a rag taped in her mouth with blood coming from everywhere, and some dude on top of her having his way. I'm sure we've all had this feeling before, but I immediately saw red. I jump on this dude's back and wrestle him out of the room, down the hall, and out of the front door. We get on the front porch and get at it, having no ravers for his well-being at all at this point. After going at it for a couple minutes, breaking the furniture and whatever else these people had on their front porch, he falls off of the porch face first. I jump down and still have no clue what made me do it. Grab my pistol out of the back of my jeans and ping it right at his face, right when he turns around. He's begging me not to, and everybody else is screaming at me. I still have no clue what made me do it, but I pulled the trigger. After what felt like a lifetime sitting there trying to realize and take in exactly what I had just done, I feel one of my friends grab the pistol out of my hand and make sure it was clear before anything else happened. I immediately run back to the room to check on the girl. Her friends had already untied her at this point and wrapped her with a bedsheet. Her face was almost unrecognizable. She was so scared her friends could barely get close to her. And then the cops arrive and handcuff everyone they could until they got the full story, which I never denied any of it. So they put me in the back of the car and haul me off, sitting in my cell waiting for court, which didn't take long due to the fact that there was maybe 1,000 people within a 300-mile radius. Family and friends came to see me from time to time for the 2 weeks I was stuck there. But finally the court date comes, and by the grace of the good Lord above and Lord knows what else, the girl that was tied to that bed was the county judge's niece. We went through the motions of court, and he ended up thanking me for what I did. He couldn't just let me go without anything, so I did get charged with stolen firearms possession and 500 hours of community service. Tell me I wasn't the luckiest man in earth that day. After a while I caught wind of what happened to the girl. Almost every bone in her face was broken and was blinded in her left eye. At first this news made it a little bit easier for me to deal with, but I still took a young man's life, whether he deserved it or not. And I know the place I sent him to is a lot worse than what that girl had to live with for the rest of her life. It's been 5 years now. I still don't get much sleep because every time I close my eyes I see that kid's face, begging me not to do what I did. I'm not 100% sure that it will ever go away. Some days are better than others, but it's never not there. I ask myself every day if I did the right thing or not. Some days I tell myself yes, and others it's hard to convince myself of that. I had to say this somewhere because words of the mouth just don't come out right most of the time. But that's my story, and I hope somebody can help me out. I killed someone today, and nothing feels like it's the right thing to do. 19 hours ago, 2 a.m. where I live, I was driving on the freeway, and a motorcyclist lost control of their vehicle. And I arrived at the scene just as the police did. There wasn't a normal warning, where the police weave from one side of the highway to the other to warn of a crash. 1 second I saw police lights, the very next second I saw a body in the road. There wasn't enough time for me to evade or avoid, and I drove over the motorcyclist. He is dead. Everything since has just felt something I should be doing. After the police told me I was to go, I couldn't, and they ended up calling a crisis therapist to convince I was allowed to leave. But I couldn't just go home after the realization that there were pieces of a person on my car. I couldn't just go home and leave parts of a human being to deal with afterwards. So the therapist and officer told me I should go to a car wash. But that felt, well, I still don't know how that felt, to be honest, but it felt like the less wrong thing to do, so I agreed. Somehow in my shock I had convinced myself that this is just something that happened to me, and I'd be okay once everything was over. But once I started the car wash, everything I convinced myself of just fucking crumbled. My plan that I'd be alright crumbled. My thoughts of I can manage the situation crumbled. I crumbled. The entire time I was physically washing my car, I was uncontrollably bawling my eyes out. The thought that this piece here once was part of a person, and I am just washing it off as though it used to be a bug, broke me. After getting home and sleeping the little bit I could, everything just feels wrong. My 1-year-old making me smile at how loving she is felt wrong. My fiancé consoling me and trying to distract me felt wrong. Being able to pet my dogs felt wrong. Me not being on the side of the road and not being stuck forever to that spot of road feels wrong. Existing at this very moment feels so indescribable wrong. All day my family has been bombarding my phone trying to reach out, but I just can't handle being asked how I'm doing again. I feel wrong, and I can't even explain how wrong is an emotion, but wrong is all I can say. My mom tried to force me to go to an aviary with the family, but again, everything is wrong. The person I killed will never go to an aviary, so how can I just go out like nothing happened? This was probably not the best thing I did today, but I just looked at my car and noticed all of the damage I didn't look close enough to see earlier this morning during the car wash. And I froze, just unable to move, unable to reconcile my feelings or thought, and everything just hit like I washed back at the car wash. And again I just stood there sobbing uncontrollably. I don't know what to do. Everyone I have tried to talk to, family, therapist, police officers, all are telling me I did the best I could and try to help me cope. But right now at this moment they are wrong. Everything is just wrong. How I manifested $20 million. The recent post with all the successes compiled inspired me to post my own. In the beginning of my career, I made a respectable $200,000 a year. I realize this is the dream salary of many, including me at the time. But when I started manifesting, I really wanted to push the limits of what I could do. I thought of a dream salary. I came up with $2.2 million a year. At the time, I remembered someone saying that's how much someone made, and it seemed so far-fetched of an income that I wanted it to be my dream. I want to emphasize that I had no pathway to make this much. It was a ludicrous dream. I had no idea how I was going to do it. I wrote the number 2.2 on a card and put it in my wallet, so I could see it every day. I started doing sets. At night I envisioned huge stacks of money. I envisioned huge checks made out to me. I saw huge amounts of money in my bank account. It didn't take long for things to change. People, circumstances, and events happened. By the end of that year, I was making money at a much higher rate. I was achieving my goal. I kept envisioning the money as I went to sleep each night. Sometimes I felt a warm vibration as I did so. Shortly after each of these, something would happen to make me a lot more money. Several twists happened along the way. One thing was that I got attacked by my business partners. They were getting jealous of me. It took a legal battle, but I came out victorious, and the bad guys left. It was definitely a bridge of incidents. I have made exactly $2.2 million for the past 8 years. I invested most of the money, and I now have a net worth of $20 million. My goal is $30 million. I expect to reach that soon. I wish all of you abundance like I have found. Note, I do not want to say what field my occupation is in. I assure you it is legal, and I help people in my job. I had a lot of response to my last post about manifesting money, and some of you have asked about other manifestations. Here's a simple story about one of my first ones. Like everyone else, I heard so many stories about manifesting a parking spot. Honestly, I thought it was kind of silly at first. But every day I drove into a parking garage, and there was that spot. A choice place right beside the exit, and a little bit larger, so the doors of other cars won't ding mine. It was the best parking spot in the whole parking garage. The only problem is that parking deck was always full, and that spot seemed to be the first chosen by everyone else. So I took some time manifesting that spot, just for fun. I would do visualizations, and every time I saw the spot I would say, that one is mine. A few weeks later, I started getting that parking spot. The garage would be completely full otherwise, but that spot was empty. And then later that spot was always empty. This was years ago. Nowadays I drive to work, pull into the garage, and park in my spot. Every single day. Every single day. It doesn't matter how many cars are in the garage. Sometimes the garage is completely full. That spot is almost always empty, as if someone has put a sign there that says reserved. I can recall maybe 2 times in the past year I had to find another spot. That's how consistent it is. It was fun to play with this, and was a fun use of what I have learned. Update after 2 years. Almost $30 million net worth. Hello everyone. I made a post in this community a while back. It's been 2 years since I made my first post to this community. You can search my post history, and several of you have asked me for an update. Here it goes. First, a little about me. I was born in abject poverty in an abusive household. I struggled growing up and had to endure things a human being should not endure. I was also briefly homeless for a while. The only person who loved me, my mother, died when I was young. I had no lucky breaks in my life. I owe all of my success to the study of self-improvement, the study of manifestation, and from learning from teachers, such as Neville Goddard. I am glad to say that I am very happy. I am still living the life of my dreams, with a net worth now of a little less than $30 million, and with an abundance of friends, some of whom are quite famous. It's hard to pin down my exact net worth, because some of it is in art and in my house, so it would depend on how that is appraised at any given time. The point is, I'm close to $30 million now. Money is still my main manifesting focus. In my original post, I told how I set a goal of making $2.2 million a year and achieved it. A year ago, I unhooked my money flow from this belief. I now choose to believe that I don't have to make money from my job, and that now I can make it from investments alone. The universe answered almost immediately. I now make less than $2.2 million a year at my job, but my investments have surpassed that level. In other words, I realized that making $2.2 million a year from working is a sort of limiting belief, and that I can make more money through means other than my job. The universe responded. I initially set my goal at $30 million net worth. As I am closing in on this milestone, I realize how short-sighted I was. I achieved my goals too fast, and I should have thought on a bigger scale. I've reframed my goal to $100 million now. Don't make the mistake I made. Set your sights really high. There are fountains of money all around us. All we have to do is dip into them. Every day the universe presents us with abundant opportunities. Sometimes we have to be silent and listen to them. For instance, a while back I had to take my dog to the vet, and the vet told me that he wanted to do a test on my dog. He said it had to be a specific test, and that he only used that particular brand. My dog was fine, but I started feeling that there was an opportunity there. I researched the company that made the test and bought stock in it. I made about $100,000 in that stock before I sold it. We live in a world of great abundance. There are plentiful opportunities available to all of us. We have to remain quiet and listen for opportunities and act when inspiration happens. I am still friends with lots of famous people. I'm not famous myself by any means, which makes it all remarkable that I have famous friends. I did have a conscious desire to manifest people in my life who are interesting, and famous people are interesting to me. So it definitely shows that it's possible to do this. One common question I have been asked: do any of my famous friends study Neville or practice law of attraction? I never discussed these topics with anyone in real life, so I've never asked any of them. But I do have a few clues. One of my friends, mega famous, had a phrase he repeated over and over to himself. The phrase meant there are no limits. He even put this phrase on a plaque in his home. I'm pretty convinced he used manifestation either intentionally or accidentally. Likewise, another friend used visualization to achieve his success. He told me he rehearsed things and practiced things in his mind. I am convinced that every famous person manifested fame, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Needless to say, I am very grateful for knowing interesting and important people. I've learned from them, and that has made my life much richer. I'm still discovering new ideas and constantly improving myself. I've learned some things about manifestation since creating my initial post several years ago. I'd like to share my thoughts with you. Many of you have found this community because you are in pain. Maybe you've lost someone special to you. Or maybe you're hurting because you are in poverty. I am convinced that manifesting from a source of pain is not a good way to achieve success. Many people say, if only I can have underscore, 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 I will be happy. The blank could be filled with money, people, fame, or anything else that people long for. I'm here to say that is completely wrong. I know people with lots of money who are unhappy. I know famous people who are unhappy. Those things don't make happiness. Likewise, when we allow other people to create our happiness for us, they often fail at doing so. They create it the way they want, not how we want. So people don't make us happy. A special partner won't make you happy. Don't give other people the power to make you happy or unhappy. Keep that power to yourself. Happiness is something we create in our own lives. We are the creators of our own destiny. We are responsible for creating our own happiness. What is happiness? The best definition I have ever heard is that happiness is the full occupation of hands, mind, and heart. So I think it's important to focus on the creation of happiness first. Then, going forward, our manifestations are synchronized with the order of the universe. The success we achieve is really a product of the happiness we feel. I know some of you are saying, well, that's easy to say, but you don't know my circumstances. I can't create happiness because of how troubled I am. I often think of the Greek philosopher Epictetus. He was born a slave and slept on a bed of straw at night, chained to a wall. He believed that he did not choose the circumstances to which he was born, but he could choose to be happy. So he chose to be happy, and he was. If Epictetus can be happy chained to a wall and sleeping on straw, so can you in your own life circumstances. Happiness is a choice, not a result. Another thing I have learned, techniques don't manifest. Let's explore this idea. If I were learning the piano and wanted one simple trick as to how I can play the piano like a master musician without any study or practice, that wouldn't really work, would it? That's not to say that skilled pianists don't have certain techniques to play better. But overall, it's their constant routine of doing everything they can to play better that makes them who they are. Likewise, those people looking for that one technique to manifest are sort of on a wrong track. For instance, SATs is a great tool, but it's only a small part of what you should be doing. This is a lifestyle, not a magic trick. It requires practice and focus, just like being a concert pianist does. Self-improvement is a lifelong road. Achievements like a wonderful partner, money, success, etc. are just milestones along that road. It's fun to have desires. It's fun to manifest. The purpose of life, I am convinced, is to experience joy. I wish abundance and happiness on everyone who reads this. Keep reading Neville Goddard and the wisdom of other teachers, and do all you can to make your dreams come true.